Ryan, what are you taking a look at?
So when Daniel Ellsberg made the decision to leak the Pentagon Papers, he did so believing that he would spend decades, if not the rest of his life, in prison. And one man did everything he could to make sure that happened, and ironically, in the process, accidentally assured that he remained free. That man, of course, was Richard Nixon. And because he recorded everything he did in the Oval Office, we actually have tape of him first learning of the leak in 1971. Here's Richard Nixon being briefed by General Alexander Haig.
Nothing else of interest in the world,
Yes,
Steve?
sir. Very significant, this goddamn New York Times expose of the most highly classified documents of the war.
Oh, that. I see. I didn't read the story, but you mean that was leaked out of the Pentagon?
Sir, the whole study that was done for McNamara and then carried on after McNamara left by Clifford and the peaceniks over there. This is a devastating security breach of the greatest magnitude of anything I've ever seen.
Well, what's being done about it then? I mean, I didn't. Did we know this was coming out?
No, we did not, sir.
Yeah.
There are just a few copies of this.
But what about the
volume report?
But what about the? Let me ask you this though. What about Laird? What's he going to do about it? Now I just start right at the top and fire some people. I mean, whatever department it came out of, I'd fire the top guy.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm sure it came from defense, and I'm sure it was stolen at the time of the turnover of the administration.
Oh, it's 2 years old then.
I'm sure it is, and they've been holding it for a juicy time, and I think they've thrown it out to affect Hatfield McGovern. That's my own estimate. But it's something that it's a mixed bag. It's a tough attack on Kennedy. It shows that the genesis of the war really occurred during 61.
Yeah, that's Clifford. I see.
And it's brutal on President Johnson. They're going to end up in a massive gut fight in the Democratic Party on this thing.
Are they?
There's some very...
But also massive against the war.
Against the war.
But it's a Pentagon study, huh?
So after the New York Times was briefly blocked from publishing the Pentagon Papers, Ellsberg managed to get them to the Washington Post, which pushed ahead in the face of the White House demand that newspapers cease publication. From there, Ellsberg went to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and elsewhere, making sure that no matter how successful the administration could be against an individual paper, that somebody could keep pumping them out. Eventually, he turned himself in.
In the fall of 1969, I took the responsibility on my own initiative of delivering to the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the U.S. Senate the information contained in the so-called Pentagon Papers, including the several studies on negotiations which have not been given to any newspaper. I could only regret that I had not at that same time released that information to the American public through the newspapers. I have now done so. I can no longer cooperate in concealing this information from the American public.
I could no longer participate in concealing this information from the American public. I want to pause on that last point because it's often said of whistleblowers that they deserve prosecution because they didn't take legal avenues available to them to disclose the information. If you remember, that was said repeatedly about Edward Snowden, that he should have gone to Congress or to the Inspector General or some such. But Ellsberg tried everything, and all those institutions did is sit on what he gave them. That's worth remembering the next time a senator asks why somebody didn't come to them first. Now, when asked why he finally decided to go to the press, Ellsberg pointed to a factor not many people may remember. While his ultimate goal was indeed to end the war, his real fear was the cycle of escalation Nixon had ratcheted up.
Why did I put it out at all? Because by the spring of 1971, I was feeling that with the attack, actually, from the fall of 1970, with the Sante raid, I saw the escalation, which had been foreshadowed in Cambodia, as speeding up and moving toward probably an all-out escalation, which I wanted to avoid at all costs.
Asked if he regretted his decision, Ellsberg offered what has become the model answer for whistleblowers.
You're not having any second thoughts about your action now, is that right?
Oh, certainly not.
Dr. Ellsberg, at a recent press conference, you said you were willing to accept any responsibility or anything that came for your part in the Pentagon Papers. The latest indictment says a 115-year prison term and a $120,000 fine for maximum. Are your thoughts still the same, that you're willing to accept any consequences?
I have two thoughts about that. I go back to my earlier answer. How can you measure the jeopardy that I'm in, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 115 years, or other ludicrous amounts like that, to the penalty that has been paid already by 50,000 American families here and hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese families? It would be absolutely presumptuous of me to pity myself in that context, and I certainly don't, and I'd be ashamed of myself.
And meanwhile, he never forgot two things. First, the extreme nature of the threat that he faced from the Nixon White House, which broke the law so severely in its pursuit of him that the federal courts threw out his charges. And also that systematically, things have gotten much worse for whistleblowers since then.
Caught there. But I'm saying I was the subject of a White House hit squad, in effect. And when I asked their prosecutor later, what do those words mean, to kill me? And he said, well, the words were to incapacitate you totally. But he said these guys never used the word kill. They all worked for the CIA. They used euphemisms, neutralize, incapacitate, terminate with extreme prejudice. That was one term. They don't like the word kill. He thought that the intent was to kill me. So my judgment, in short, that Snowden or Manning, had she been not arrested right away, she was probably safer being arrested than simply being eliminated. I think if Snowden went back to the United States, the idea that he'd be free to speak to the public, as I was, out on bond for almost 2 years before my trial, my charges were dismissed. I was able to speak freely at rallies everywhere else. Manning was held in isolation for 10.5 months until a public protest got her into a general prison population. I think Snowden would be in isolation for the rest of his life.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.